Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cackle. And this is where we meet with Midwest changemakers and connect the dots between economic trends and the lived experiences of people navigating them. I'm Emily Heinz. I'm the founder and managing director of Entry Point. At Entry Point, we partner with economic development organizations and nonprofits to foster inclusive and vibrant communities across the Midwest through research and community-focused programming. You can check out all of our research. We just give it away for free at entrypointmi.com. So welcome, everyone. I'm super excited. We have Dr. Navin Goyal, who's the co-founder and CEO of Loud Capital in Columbus, Michigan, joining us today. Heyo!
Hello, how are you? So great to be here.
So yeah, I'm so excited. I was saying just before we went live how I hear all about you, but then just never have met you before. So I'm like, this is very fun.
Yeah, and this is good. And my response to that was it's good to have a conversation versus just, watching each other's posts and content. So it's really nice to be here and be able to talk.
Yeah, I do love that. So give a little bit of background, because even when I was reading stuff on, your website and stuff, it's you guys are doing a lot of really cool stuff. So give a little bit of background on Loud Capital and kind of what the focus is of the firm.
Yeah, so Loud Capital is an early stage venture capital firm and alternative investment firm. And so what we do is we have various funds that investors invest into, and we use those funds to invest and help build companies that are impactful. And impactful is a very broad word, but basically companies or people doing things that help society and people. There's a lot of ways to make money in the investment space, but I would love to see more effort and energy and money put into companies that are actually helping people. And, my background as a physician probably has weaved into the way I think, but, going into the entrepreneurial world, it's like the Wild West. And we really felt like we had an opportunity to do productive and positive things with capital.
Yeah, I really like that. I like the additional layer of intentionality in there, because it is you see all these really cool companies. I'm such a entrepreneurship fangirl, but you see these companies that are just changing the world and have these really cool technologies and things that they're doing, and that's if they can get the backing, it's it just has such an impact on the way we live. I feel certainly over the last 18 months, we've kind of seen things like that emerge where you're oh yeah, I never used Zoom before. And now all of a sudden it's oh, this is the only way we talk.
Yeah. But I will say a little asterisk on that. I mean, we obviously see a lot of pitches and a lot of deal flow, and it seems like every entrepreneur wants to change the world, and that's fine. Sometimes the solution that they bring to the table is more of, hey, this is slightly better than what's out there. And so it's really a good exercise to really dig deep and say, is this actually a problem you're solving? Or is this just a slightly better, maybe a little cheaper product that's going to make a lot of money? And that's the stuff that we like to comb out, because we don't want to spend time and effort investing in our name Loud Capital is to be loud and active investors. We're very strategic investors. We're a group of entrepreneurs. So we have built our own companies. And so when we invest in companies, we're number one, empathetic to entrepreneurs. We understand that it's not a straight line. And so if you're a person with a financial background only and never built a company, perhaps, it's just about the numbers and how things are trying to be predicted in a straight line, but that's really not entrepreneurship. So it's that empathy, but it's also the understanding that we want to spend time building something alongside with you that is impactful,
Yeah. At what stage do you guys invest at?
So we invest usually in the seed, pre-Series A, Series A spectrum. We have done some ones that are a little bit later, a little bit earlier, but that's kind of the area we fall in. And if you look at where a lot of dollars in venture capital firms are, it's really gotten more later and later, Series A, B, C, and these other letters. And a lot of private equity firms, venture capital firms play in that space. The thing is, there's not as much focus, not as much capital that's in the earlier stage. And, it can be a little lonely down here, to be honest. We would love to see more firms putting more time into it, but it's a different art or a different skill because there is a lot of unknowns that early stage. It does, in my opinion, it would be very helpful if you have a more of a strategic investor mentality versus capital, and then let's see how this goes. And then also, I think, for all these great companies and founders to be able to make it to a B or a C, or, where a lot of venture capitalists can come, someone needs to really curate and help grow the companies early on. So that's why I say it's a little lonely. It'd be nice to have more funds and more people involved a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Are you guys focused at all on like the Midwest or Ohio, or even just by happenstance?
Sure. So we are very focused in the Midwest and South, I would say. We have our headquarters is here in Columbus. We have an office in Chicago and an office in Raleigh at the moment. So naturally, we just have a lot of Midwest and South centric kind of investments. We have invested in other areas of the country, but when you look at amount of funds and when you look, so there's a younger venture capital ecosystem in the Midwest. And so what that means is there's not as many established firms and funds. There's not as much capital that goes into the Midwest and South. That's statistically, it's very far from the West Coast and the East Coast. So it makes sense to focus on these great deal flow in the Midwest, but also from an investor standpoint, you actually have great, solid people and business models that are not really looking at the ecosystem and say, hey, I can raise at a huge valuation. I can take my company and raise a lot of money at this crazy value because there's a lot of sophisticated investors that would pay for it. Here, you need to educate, number one, what venture capital is. A lot of people still don't know what that is. Angel investing, and that's fine. That's actually half my time is spent educating people, investors, established investors, institutional investors, family offices, et cetera, on why venture capital is a great alternative investment, but then what that money is going towards and why we believe that it's not only going to be profitable, but it's extremely purpose driven. And so it feels good. We want to make you money, but you can have all of those, and that's where, I think investment can be really fun, and it can be about problem solving.
Yeah, I agree. So you are a physician turned venture capitalist, and like I do love a thing like that. I know one other physician turned venture capitalist who was like, anytime we go to like meetings or something, he would like always be using the hand sanitizer, and I was like, my gosh, you're just like psycho. Like, stop using the hand sanitizer. Relax on that. And he was like, no. After he's like, once you're a doctor, you will use hand sanitizer forever.
Yeah.
But then it was really funny. Like, I had to text him like March 2020. I was like, yeah, I think you were probably right about that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we know a lot of what people don't know or don't see. And once you are in the hospitals or training and practicing, it's, there's just a lot of cases and things where it was an infection that caused this to happen. And it gets to you, right? We're all human.
Yeah. It's funny. Doctors know things. Who knew? So how do you feel like kind of that background has shaped like how you are as an investor?
Yeah. So as a quick overview, so I'm an anesthesiologist by training, and I practiced in private practice for 13 years at a large hospital system here in Columbus, and really appreciate the field. That was my end career goal, and then things happen. But I really think the intent to go into medicine to help people, I thought it was challenging, and I thought it was constantly problem solving for patients. So how does that apply to where I am right now in the world of entrepreneurship? Well, number one, in 2014, I co-founded a company called SmileMD that the holding company now is called OFFOR Health. And that is a mobile anesthesia company where we bring anesthesiologists, a care team, and we take care of kids and adults and dental practices. And so we bring equipment, we do general anesthetics. And so we put kids and adults off to sleep for procedures in the office, because many times a lot of procedures need to go to a surgery center or a hospital to get anesthesia.
Oh, okay.
not necessarily for a sterile operating room and other things that are available. So if you
Yeah.
can take that and bring that to communities, especially communities where they're far away from medical systems, communities that have logistical transportation, which not
Yeah.
just communities, that's everywhere. And so I bring that up because my lens of entrepreneurship was through SmileMD. And now we have 60 employees. We're in 3 different states. We're taking care of thousands of patients that medical centers that I used to work in are not really able to provide that access.
Yeah.
Well, to me, building something from scratch that is now growing and very exciting and is extremely impactful, I realized, hey, we can build things that are helping people and patients and society, not just being a physician in a hospital system where I was
Yeah.
seeing patients, one at a time, which was impactful in its own right. But this is another way in helping people in a different way, in a much more scalable way. So I talk to a lot of physicians, medical students, people reach out like, wait, what the heck did you do? You left your practice and you're going here? Why?
Yeah.
So I discuss this a lot, but I just like to broaden people's mindset of the intention and ethics of how physicians treat patients can also be utilized in a different way. And entrepreneurship is my vehicle.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That is interesting. Like, man, it must have been like really crazy this last 18 months with your company because I feel like so many people were like kind of nervous to go to the dentist.
Yeah, it's
Or maybe that
actually
helps you like quick knock them out and they'll be fine.
no. So actually, I'll tell you one thing that's really opened up the eyes of people in healthcare systems was, the healthcare systems were extremely overwhelmed, right?
Mhm.
Unprepared for what happened and what is happening right now. And this is not to point blame, but it's really like, okay, well, we have a lot of patients that aren't being taken care of. We have patients who are having heart attacks that aren't calling the ambulance because they're scared to go to the hospital because there's a lot of COVID patients there,
Mhm.
right? And so, in general, what it did was accelerate the solutions, or at least the attempt to look for solutions that the hospital and the surgery centers aren't where a lot of the care should be, even specialized care. How can you take care of patients, especially if you can in their own community, right? So you can take out
Yeah.
transportation, logistics, wait times, backlog. How can you do that? So for SmileMD and OFFOR Health, yes, it's there's a lot more people reaching out. We're very, very busy. But I also think it was a good way for us to accelerate solutions so people like us can get taken care of that, don't necessarily have to go to a hospital or surgery center. And
Yeah.
that's SmileMD. And then I'll let you talk because I don't want to talk forever.
Well, that's what you're here for. So yeah, I do feel like, I mean, even like you see like telemedicine or like the visits where before like people would have been like, you want to have like a Zoom call with me to talk about my medical stuff? Like, oh no, like, or whatever, like that's not an option or something. So it's nice to see like some of these things that were kind of like they wouldn't have happened. And then now it's like commonplace where it's like, oh yeah, you just schedule a 15-minute quick call
Yes.
with your doctor instead.
And that's how I look at healthcare. And you're exactly right. It accelerated telemedicine, which has been around for a long time, but the adoption of insurance companies of um, practices have increased. But now it's like, hey, I saw these patients and they were a couple hours away, let's say, and I did a consult and they need this. So now what do you do? How do you take care of that patient that's a couple hours away? Do you still say, hey, I saw them, some of them don't need to come here, but some of them should?
Mhm.
Perhaps. But what about some of them who can be seen, but they don't have to be physically at this hospital or this medical center or this practice? So
Yeah.
that's what I'm really interested in, is taking care of patients who we're seeing, let's say in a telemedicine consult, and how we can do that. And that's what we focus on with like SmileMD and all the things we're doing.
Yeah.
And other companies are as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. Um, So what is like I mean, you talked a little bit earlier about how like you spend half your time like educating people, like
Yeah.
especially I've heard this from other VCs as well about
Yeah.
like when they're fundraising, when they're going to like high net worth individuals, family offices, a lot of
Yeah.
times like in the Midwest, they have to first be like, oh, this is what venture capital is. So like you give this money and then we invest in companies and then this is how return happens. Like, what would your advice to higher net worth individuals who are like just starting to get familiar with this, like the entrepreneurial ecosystem and like the world of venture capital, and like how do they like learn about opportunities to make investments, or like what resources would you suggest for them?
Yeah, we tried to talk to a lot of people and provide educational materials. We have a website right now, loud.vc, that we're actually updating, but there's an educational section on it to learn what venture capital is, what alternative investments are. Because in the end, outside of public markets, if you look at the stock market, there's plenty of, people who claim to be experts, but either way, there's a lot of talk and education about, okay, what is the stock market? How do you invest? And then you go to
Yeah.
the private markets, right? Which is the whole alternative investment space, right? From real estate to financing, venture capital, all these things. And so we recognize very early on that there's not this, really resource to go and learn about why I should be looking at the private markets. How should I start? Who can I trust?
Mm.
But I don't have like this amazing resource that's available yet. We're working on educational materials by the day. But one thing I can tell people is, specifically for investors who are interested in this, or family offices, institutions, I spend a lot of time talking one-on-one with, what are your goals? And outside of, okay, I want to diversify, these buckets makes total sense. Why is this bucket really important? And then I talk a lot about us being entrepreneurs and curating our own investments. And what that means is, again, there's a lot of funds and firms out there that will invest capital, make a few phone calls perhaps to their entrepreneurs to help out. And then they, continue to invest in other companies. What we feel like we want to do is build a relationship with the founder. And then how do you mitigate that risk that the pathway ahead of them is going to entail, right? So
Yeah.
venture capital is risky, but it's even riskier when you're just placing bets and you're not being strategic advisors and mentors to the companies. And so that's why we strongly believe we can mitigate a lot of risk by a very thorough diligence process. But then once these obstacles come, right? Once they do, they will. It's not if. When they do, it'd be great to have a team of entrepreneurs who you could call, and approachable people that you can call. And I'll tell you, that's one thing that we get feedback on is, wow, you're pretty easy to talk to, or my team in general. That is a big thing. It's people investing in people, and so we have to have interest and a skill set to communicate and be accessible. I think it's not an art that I see in this space very often.
Yeah, we had a guest on, man, it was probably like a year ago now. We're on like, this is the 65th episode. Isn't that so ridiculous?
Wow.
I should have done seasons, because now I see everyone being like, announcing a new season. I'm like, what are your seasons? Like,
Yeah,
8
you should do
episodes?
that.
Like, what's going on?
You should do that. Yeah. This should be a season finale. This is season finale of season 1.
Maybe all of a sudden have to do things that are so dramatic, and then like at the end, I'll just like shut the computer off and be like, "What's gonna happen next?" And then we'll be like, next week on the season premiere. Anyway, gosh, what was I even gonna ask you? Like now,
Forgot.
like,
See, you're so focused
we're
on the
not
season
even
finale.
we're not even having an interview anymore. Gosh, what was I gonna ask you? I'll think of it later. I'll ask you the next question.
All good.
So what impact do you think venture capital can have on society? Like, I think you've talked a lot of like around the skirts of it, but like how do you feel like, oh, I know what I was going to ask you. Wait,
Okay.
It's the same thing. So so last year we had a guest that was Angela Barbash with Revalue. It's like they do like financial advising, but a lot of what you talk about just like, what are your values, like how, and then like how do you invest your capital, like as a higher net worth individual, in things that are kind of align with your values. And so she does like a ton of like values based like advising, so like different like venture capital funds that are like aligned with values, or like different types of investments that people can make. So like, I do find like there is like this like pocket of investors that I think are kind of trying to, and I could see this becoming a lot more popular, but are trying to kind of like you guys like think like, okay, how are we aligning with like the values of the people that invest in our fund?
Yeah.
Which I find to be very interesting. So that brings me to my actual other next question is, is what do you think venture capital, like what impact do you think venture capital can have on society?
Yeah. So if you just look at venture capital dollars, a lot of money that corporations, pension funds, et cetera, invest in various venture capital funds, then that money goes towards companies that want to provide a return. Plenty of them do not. Plenty of them fail, and they ones that do provide a return, that's great. And many corporations will say, okay, I got a return. I'm going to continue putting more money. Well, all I want to say is like the companies that receive funding, whether they ended up doing well or did not, are they going towards companies that are trying to solve real problems? It really goes back to that. So I'll see a lot of companies that, okay, it's an app that's entertaining and doesn't do too much, and it gets so much attention and so much money, and then it exits, and then it becomes integrated in a large tech company.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's not valuable, but there's a lot of energy and money that goes towards that. In the meantime, half a mile away from my house, I have kids who can't even access internet, can't access healthcare, can't access a physician or even a dentist for dental care. I'm just bringing it up because all this money that's coming from this area, but we're not even looking at our own backyard for real problems. If venture capital to me is looking in the backyard and realizing, hey, there are actually a couple companies, and many times there's companies and people working on these problems, especially people from those communities that have been personally affected. And so if you take, and it takes a little bit more time, by the way, to look for these great people and companies in different communities. And that's what we pride ourselves on. It's not just a friend of a friend knocked on the door at our venture capital firm and, oh yeah, this sounds great. So it's really being intentional about finding those great people, making sure it makes sense in your diligence process, et cetera, and then putting capital into that and money into that, into actual problem solving. That's how venture capital can create a positive impact for society. And I'll tell you, just being in this space for 6 years now, there are so many more problems in our backyard than we realize. Any problem. It's gotten worse with COVID. And, again, access to care, basic medical management, underbanked. So people who don't even have a credit to get a credit card or a bank account, they have to pay higher fees. So we recently invested in a company in Cincinnati that helps the underbanked. So there's just all these things that I wish more people talked about, more people focused on and funded. I can tell you we're a smaller firm, a large vision, but I just want more and more people to start discussing how powerful investment in venture capital can be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, it is like, and it's funny how like you said, over the 6 years, like at first it's like, might be like a lot of like, okay, where are these companies and things, but I'm sure you guys are seeing a lot now that you guys are, out there looking for these types of opportunities to invest in like that market of investment opportunities, that I feel like it's like, you must be getting a lot more people just coming to you being like, oh, you guys are the people that invest in this and like do such a good job at that. So I bet it's like getting a little bit easier.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, like, there's a recent investment firm that we spent a lot of time with that ended up becoming an investor. And they had been investing in multiple different impact investments and funds. And I'll tell you, the word impact is very common now. And, you really have to see action. What does impact mean? Sometimes it's just a box that's checked that says, oh yeah, this impact investment because they have a diverse team. Awesome. And it's really important for those firms and family offices and individuals who really care, just like we do as consumers nowadays, right? We care about the brand. We care about what they're doing. some of us care about who they're employing, how they're treating their workers, what they're doing for the environment, what they're doing for society. There's a lot of consumers that care more now than before. And
Yeah.
all I say is investors care too. And so it's really, there's no label like we have to do on a consumer product where you have to say, okay, this, et cetera, et cetera. On an investment fund or firm, there's no standard at the moment. So it's really getting to know what your process is. And I'm coming around to an answer of this, but the firm I was speaking to realized after I was talking about spending time to find people, solving real problems. And we go to the communities where the problems are and we look for great entrepreneurs doing that. That really resonated with them. And they're like, wow, because, they're a large firm and they have a lot of capital. And they're like, we totally feel better and more thorough that we had this conversation. So when we put our capital, we're actually fulfilling one of our investment thesis, or our passion or our purpose. And they didn't realize before. It was kind of like, well, perhaps these other investments that we were doing, we didn't look deep in, we didn't look into enough. So it's just, those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, it is like true values-based investing instead of just kind of like check like a box on a piece of paper and be like impact investing.
Yeah.
So what's on the horizon for you guys? Like either personally, professionally, or like
Sure.
where are you guys going?
There's a lot of great things on the horizon. We're very passionate about education, just like I'm explaining these things right now. Again, I really enjoy this. Our whole team enjoys educating people on what investments are, why we're doing things, how we can enable and accelerate problem solving for things that are every day around us.
Yeah.
And so I'll say that we are working on various educational platforms to provide for people to learn more about investments. We're providing a platform for physicians to learn about things outside of medicine, because there's a lot of burned out physicians, and every human deserves to have, use different parts of their brain. And I'll tell you, being a physician who left my practice in 2018, and now that it's pretty even more stressful with COVID and all the things that are happening, I think people need a refresher and a reminder of who they are and what they can do and use different parts of their brain. So I'm excited about these educational platforms. And I'm also writing a book that I've been working on last year and a half that hopefully is going to be released in the next, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks. And it's really about the story of me starting out wanting to be a physician, realizing some stressors and shortcomings in the field of medicine, but what you can do and how you can kind of expand your mindset, break out a little bit. It's not just for physicians. It's really for, I'd say, a lot of professionals or people working towards a goal. And then you realize, hey, why am I feeling this way? And then
you do hear that a lot these days. So that's well timing for that book.
Yeah. And I talk a lot about entrepreneurship and venture capital, just like we're doing right now, and what I look at what entrepreneurship and venture capital can do for society. So it's really explaining the journey, the mindset shift. One thing I like to tell people is I'm just like everyone else. I did not expect to be here, but I took some small steps and here I am. And that's what I encourage a lot of people to do, is just take these small steps in different directions. Many times we overthink things, or we say, I don't even know how to start. And starting sometimes is picking up, your phone and calling someone and say, hey, can you tell me what you do? Or do you know a person who could help me do this? It's those conversations that start things.
Yeah, we hear that a lot on the show, where people are just saying, like, when I was like, what advice would you give to people that are thinking about starting a business right now or whatever? And it's like, people always say that, like, you don't know what you don't know until you just kind of like jump in and like get started, and then you figure it out along the way. And so that is a common thread.
Yeah. And for example, hey, I want to start a business. I want to start selling t-shirts on Amazon. Okay. And there'll be people who say, gosh, I really want to think about it. I really want to, what should I do? Should I take a course? Should I, and so I would say, do you know any person, or do you know someone of someone who's ever done this before, sold anything on Amazon? Yeah, actually, go talk to them. How did you start? Like, it's that. And that's okay, by the way. We need each other to sometimes push each other to say, go talk to that person. We need to be told sometimes. But that's what I do all the time. It's not about learning a course or doing something. And I'm not saying anything against it, but it's taking steps. Network, leverage. I always talk about leveraging your network. I never knew what my neighbors and my aunts and uncles did until I was in this space, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, how's it going? How's work? Okay, cool. I never really asked. But you realize there's a lot of people around you who could be mentors and very helpful, and vice versa. They probably are curious about what you do.
Yeah, that is true. I like how you were like, nothing against taking a course. As a doctor, you spent like 100 years in school. So I was like, well, yeah, obviously.
12 years of training. Yeah,
You're like, training and things like that are just fine, but also sometimes it is just like you need to just talk to somebody who's done it. And I think it's like talking to like fellow business owners, or like for you talking to like fellow like venture capitalists or whatever. A lot of times it's like super cathartic because you're like, oh my God, this thing is going on. They'll be like, I know. And you're like, thank you. Someone else is in this hell with me. Or like can celebrate the like good things. Like when good things happen, they're like, oh, I totally know how that is. So it is really nice. But well, that's it. What's the name of your book?
It's called Physician Underdog. Leveraging the underdog mentality to move forward.
Oh, cool. And then is it going to be on Amazon or like?
Yeah, it'll be on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. It'll actually have a website. It'll go live, I think, tomorrow, physicianunderdog.com. It'll have all the information.
Oh, that's so awesome. And then where can people go to find out more about Loud Capital?
Yeah, if you go to loud.vc, that's our website, and we're updating it here very soon, but it has a lot of information on there. And then I'm pretty active on social, on LinkedIn and Twitter. So you can find me there, and Loud Capital is on all social channels as well. So we like to, again, talk about venture, talk about our companies, how impactful they are, updates, and how it's relevant. So at least we try.
Sweet. Yay. Awesome. Well, it was so nice meeting you.
Yeah, it's same. I look forward to meeting in person at some time when I'm in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, my sister goes to Ohio State, Ohio State,
when you're in Columbus, then
I'll be like around there sometime. But
yeah, cool. Well, thanks for what you do. Thanks for the discussion and for what you do. I know it's a lot of effort. So
cool. Well, thank you. All right. Well, thank you, and I will talk to you more later. And see everybody next week.
Take care. Bye, everyone.